Aubrey Davis pressed her forehead against the cold metal of the bar's back office door, staring at the calculator screen for the third time. $247.83. Her entire bank account. Rent was due in 48 hours, and she was $680 short. She hit the clear button and tried again, as if different fingers on different keys might somehow produce different numbers. They didn't. They never did. Outside, the storm hammered Brooklyn like it had a personal grudge. Rain didn't just fall, it attacked, pounding the bar's windows so hard she worried the glass might shatter. The weather report said it was the worst storm to hit New York in 15 years. Aubrey thought that felt about right. Everything in her life seemed determined to break at once. She walked back into the main room, surveying the aftermath of another slow night. 6 customers total. 6. The tip jar held $12 in crumpled singles and loose change. She'd been pulling double shifts at Murphy's Bar for 8 months straight, opening at 11 a.m., closing at 2 a.m., and she was still drowning. The register drawer stuck when she pulled it open. Inside, 3 checks she couldn't deposit until Monday, and a stack of bills she couldn't pay even then. Electricity, past due. Phone, 1 missed payment from disconnection. Student loans from the nursing degree she'd never finished. $340 a month she didn't have. Her hands shook as she wiped down the bar for the final time. She'd skipped lunch again. Skipped dinner, too. The protein bar she'd eaten at 9 a.m. was still sitting heavy in her stomach, trying to convince her body it was enough. It wasn't. The lights flickered once, then twice. Aubrey froze, holding her breath. If the power went out, she'd have to throw out everything in the cooler. She couldn't afford to replace any of it. The building's landlord had already threatened to lock her out of her studio apartment. She'd borrowed money from her coworker Lisa twice already this month. There was no one left to ask. 3 months ago, she'd been a semester away from her RN license. 1 semester. Then her father's medical bills came due. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. No insurance. No savings. She dropped out to work full-time, thinking she'd go back. Thinking there'd be time. He died 6 weeks later, leaving her with $43,000 in medical debt and a voicemail she still couldn't delete. She'd applied to every hospital, every clinic, every urgent care facility within a 30-mile radius. 47 applications, not even a rejection email. Without the degree, she was just another broke 26-year-old with no prospects and a dead-end job. She'd already sold her laptop, her winter coat, the small gold necklace her mother had given her before the divorce. There was nothing left to pawn, nothing left to borrow against. Her phone buzzed a reminder from the debt collector. 3rd one this week. She silenced it without reading and shoved it in her apron pocket. The guilt gnawed at her every single day. Her father had worked 2 jobs his whole life so she could be the first in their family to finish college. And she couldn't even do that. Couldn't save him. Couldn't save herself. The bar was freezing now. The heat had cut off an hour ago, and Aubrey's fingers were numb as she stacked the last of the glasses behind the counter. Murphy's was a neighborhood dive, the kind of place where regulars came to forget their problems, not solve them. Faded neon signs buzzed in the windows. The jukebox in the corner hadn't worked in 2 years. Vinyl booths with cracked red leather lined one wall. It wasn't much, but it was all she had. Thunder boomed so loud the bottles on the shelves rattled. Aubrey jumped, her heart hammering. She hated storms, hated the way they made the world feel small and trapped and dangerous. She grabbed her jacket from the hook by the office and pulled it on, zipping it all the way up. Her shift had ended 20 minutes ago, but she'd been dragging her feet. Going home meant facing the eviction notice taped to her door. It meant staring at the empty refrigerator and trying to decide which bill to ignore this month. At least here, she could pretend she had control over something. She turned off the main lights, leaving only the dim glow of the exit sign and the neon beer logos in the windows. The rain streaked the glass in violent patterns, distorting the streetlights outside into wavering smears of yellow and red. Aubrey walked to the front door, keys jingling in her hand. She reached for the lock. The door exploded inward. A man stumbled inside, drenched and gasping, rain pouring off his black suit like he'd been pulled from the ocean. His dark hair was plastered to his forehead, and his white dress shirt clung to his chest, nearly transparent from the water. Tattoos marked his hands, dark, intricate ink that crawled up from his knuckles and disappeared under his sleeves. But it wasn't the tattoos that made Aubrey freeze. It was the child in his arms. A little girl, no more than 5 or 6, wrapped in a soaked black coat. Her head rested limply against the man's shoulder, her small face pale and slack. Her lips were faintly blue. She wasn't moving. The man's eyes swept the street behind him, wild, calculating, desperate. Then he turned to Aubrey, and for the first time, she saw his face clearly. Sharp jawline, high cheekbones, a thin scar running along his left temple. Eyes that were dark and hollow and filled with something that looked like controlled panic. He wasn't asking for help. He was begging. "Please," he said, his voice rough and low. "Just hide us." For a moment, Aubrey's pulse hammered in her ears. Every instinct screamed at her to step back, to tell him to leave, to lock the door and call the police. But then headlights swept across the window. A black SUV crawled past the bar, slow and predatory. The man's jaw clenched. His grip on the little girl tightened. Aubrey looked at the child's face again, so pale, so still, and something inside her cracked. She stepped aside. "Get in," she whispered. The man didn't hesitate. He slipped past her, water dripping onto the floor in heavy streams. Aubrey locked the door behind him, her hands shaking so badly she almost dropped the keys. Outside, the SUV's brake lights flared red. It stopped. Aubrey's breath came in short, shallow bursts as she watched the black SUV idle outside. The red glow of its brake lights painted the rain-slicked street in shades of blood and warning. The man stood perfectly still in the center of the bar, water pooling around his expensive leather shoes. He didn't look at her. His entire focus was trained on the window, on the vehicle that had stopped directly in front of Murphy's. Up close, he was even more imposing than she'd first realized. Tall, easily over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled out his tailored suit despite it being soaked through. The tattoos on his hands weren't random prison ink. They were deliberate, artistic, the kind that spoke of money and power and a world Aubrey had only ever seen in movies. But it was the little girl that held her attention. She was so small in his arms, bundled in a coat far too large for her. Her dark hair hung in wet tangles around her face. Her skin had a grayish tint that made Aubrey's nursing instincts scream. "Is she breathing?" Aubrey whispered. The man's jaw tightened. "She's breathing. She needs a hospital." "No hospitals." His voice was flat, absolute, final. Outside, the SUV's passenger door opened. Aubrey's stomach dropped. A figure emerged, tall, broad, wearing a dark jacket with the collar pulled up against the rain. He stood on the sidewalk, scanning the street, then turned to look directly at the bar. "Get down," the man hissed. He moved with startling speed, dropping into a crouch behind the bar counter and pulling the child closer to his chest. Aubrey followed instinctively, her knees hitting the rubber floor mat with a dull thud. They were inches apart now, close enough that she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his fingers trembled slightly as they pressed against the girl's back, close enough to smell rain and expensive cologne and something metallic blood. Maybe, though she couldn't see where. The little girl stirred, making a soft whimpering sound. "Shh, Nina," the man whispered, his voice suddenly gentle. "Shh, sweetheart, we're safe." Nina. The girl had a name. Footsteps approached the door, heavy boots on wet pavement. Aubrey's heart hammered so hard she thought it might burst through her ribcage. She pressed her back against the bar cabinet, trying to make herself smaller, invisible. The door handle rattled. Someone was trying to get in. The man, whoever he was, shifted his weight, and Aubrey caught a glimpse of something beneath his jacket. A gun. The handle of a gun tucked into a shoulder holster. Oh God. What had she done? The rattling stopped. Then came 3 sharp knocks. "Hey!" a voice called from outside, muffled by the rain and glass. "Anyone in there?" Aubrey's mind went blank with terror. She looked at the man. His eyes met hers, dark, intense, calculating. He gave a single, slight shake of his head. "Don't answer." But the knocking came again, harder this time, more insistent. "I saw someone moving in there," the voice continued. "Open up." Aubrey's throat went dry. If she didn't answer, they'd know something was wrong. They'd break in. They'd find them. The man seemed to read her thoughts. He leaned closer, his voice barely audible. "You're a waitress closing up. That's all. You saw nothing." His eyes held hers for a moment longer, and in that brief connection, Aubrey saw something that made her decision. Not threat. Not violence. Desperation. The kind that came from protecting something you loved more than your own life. She stood up. Her legs felt like water as she walked to the door, smoothing down her apron with shaking hands. Through the rain-distorted glass, she could make out 2 figures now, both large, both waiting. Aubrey unlocked the door and opened it just wide enough to speak through. "We're closed," she said, keeping her voice steady. "Have been for 20 minutes. The man closest to her was exactly what she'd expected. Thick neck, cold eyes, a scar running through his left eyebrow. He looked past her into the bar, scanning the dim interior. "Saw someone come in here," he said. "Tall guy, dark suit, carrying a kid." Aubrey forced herself to look confused. "I've been cleaning up. Been alone for the past half hour." She gestured at the empty bar behind her. "See for yourself if you want. But you'll be looking at a whole lot of nothing." The man's eyes narrowed. His partner stepped forward, a younger guy with a snake tattoo curling up his neck. "Mind if we take a look around?" Snake Tattoo asked, though it wasn't really a question. Aubrey's pulse skyrocketed, but she stepped back and opened the door wider. "Be my guest, but I've got to lock up in 5 minutes or my boss will have my ass." They entered, boots tracking water across the floor she'd just mopped. Aubrey forced herself to move normally, to walk back behind the bar and continue wiping down the counter as if armed men searching her workplace was just another Tuesday inconvenience. The first man checked the bathrooms. The second examined the storage room, pushing aside boxes and bags of supplies. They moved with practiced efficiency, the kind that came from doing this often. All the while, Aubrey knew the man and his daughter were crouched behind the bar, directly beneath where she stood, inches away from discovery. She kept wiping the same spot on the counter, over and over, her hands miraculously steady even as her mind screamed. The first man emerged from the bathroom, shaking his head. His partner returned from the storage room empty-handed. They met in the center of the bar, and for one terrible moment, the first man's gaze drifted to the bar itself, to the exact spot where someone might hide. Aubrey held her breath. Then his phone buzzed. He pulled it out, read something on the screen, and cursed under his breath. "Come on," he said to his partner. They spotted him on Flatbush. They moved toward the door, and Aubrey allowed herself the smallest breath of relief. The first man paused at the threshold, looking back at her with eyes that held no warmth, no humanity. "You see a guy matching that description, tall, dark suit, tattoos, traveling with a little girl, you call this number." He dropped a card on the nearest table. Then they were gone, swallowed by the storm. Aubrey stood frozen at the door for a full 30 seconds after the SUV's taillights disappeared into the rain. Her hand was still on the lock, knuckles white from gripping the metal too hard. Her entire body trembled, not from cold, but from the adrenaline crash that was hitting her all at once. She'd just lied to armed men. Men who clearly had no problem breaking into places, hurting people, doing whatever it took to find what they were looking for. And what they were looking for was hiding behind her bar. "They're gone," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was saying it for him or for herself. A moment passed. Then the man rose slowly from behind the counter, still cradling the little girl against his chest. Nina's head rested on his shoulder, her small hand clutching a fistful of his wet shirt. She was awake now, Aubrey realized. Those dark eyes were open, watching everything with the kind of awareness that didn't belong on a child's face. The man's gaze swept the bar once more before settling on Aubrey. "You didn't have to do that." "I know." Her voice came out sharper than she intended. "I should have let them find you. I should have." She stopped, pressing her palm against her forehead. "What the hell did I just do?" "You saved our lives." The words hung in the air between them, simple and absolute. Aubrey looked at the little girl Nina, who was studying her with those two old eyes. Up close, she could see that the child was beautiful, maybe 5 or 6 years old, with delicate features and dark hair that would probably curl when it dried. But there was something haunted in her expression, something that spoke of seeing too much, too soon. "She needs to see a doctor," Aubrey said, her professional instincts kicking back in. "Her lips are still blue. She could have hypothermia. If she's been out in this storm, no doctors." The man's tone left no room for argument. "No hospitals, no police." "Then what?" "You just keep running through the rain with a sick child until—" Aubrey bit off the rest of the sentence. But they both knew how it ended. "Until they catch you. Until she dies." The man's jaw worked, muscle twitching beneath stubbled skin. For the first time, Aubrey saw past the controlled exterior to the exhaustion underneath. The fear, the desperation of a man who'd been running too long with too few options. "I need to get her warm," he said finally. "Dry clothes, food. Then we'll leave, and you'll never see us again." Aubrey laughed, a short, bitter sound that bordered on hysterical. "Right, because those guys definitely won't come back, because I'm definitely not already involved in whatever this is. They won't come back here. They think they have another lead. And when that lead goes nowhere?" Aubrey crossed her arms. When they realize you played them? What then? The man didn't answer. He didn't have to. They both knew the answer. Nina shifted in his arms, and he automatically adjusted his grip, his hand cradling the back of her head with practiced gentleness. The gesture was so instinctive, so protective, that it made Aubrey's chest tighten. "Who are you?" she asked quietly. "Someone who made a mistake." He looked down at his daughter. "Someone who's trying to fix it before it costs me everything." It wasn't an answer. Not really. But something in his voice, the raw honesty of it, made Aubrey believe him. She walked to the door and flipped the lock, then moved to the windows and pulled down the old vinyl shades that they never used. The bar fell into deeper shadow, lit only by the exit sign and the dim glow from the back office. "Storage room," she said, gesturing toward the back. "There are clean towels in there. Some of the staff keep extra clothes in the lockers. You might find something dry." The man studied her for a long moment, and Aubrey had the uncomfortable feeling of being assessed, measured, filed away in some mental database. "Why are you helping us?" he asked. Aubrey thought about the eviction notice on her apartment door, about her father's medical bills and her unfinished degree and the 47 job applications that had gone nowhere, about every time in the past 8 months when she'd needed help and no one had been there. "Because she's a kid," Aubrey said simply, looking at Nina. "And she's scared. And I'm not the kind of person who turns away a scared kid, even if her father is." She paused. "What are you, exactly? Drug dealer? Mob boss? International art thief?" Something flickered across the man's face. Not quite a smile, but close. "Something like that. Great. Wonderful. I'm harboring a criminal." Aubrey rubbed her temples. "I'm going to lose my job. Or get arrested. Or get killed. Possibly all three. You won't." The certainty in his voice should have been reassuring. It wasn't. "I'll make sure of it." Nina stirred again, making a soft sound of distress. Her small hand reached up to touch her father's face, and he immediately shifted his attention to her, murmuring something too quiet for Aubrey to hear. The tenderness in that moment, the way his entire posture softened, the way his voice dropped to something gentle and safe, cracked something in Aubrey's chest. This wasn't just some criminal running from the law. This was a father protecting his child. And for reasons she couldn't fully explain, that mattered. "There's a first aid kit in the office," Aubrey said, her tone softer now. "And I think there's some soup in the back. It's not much, but it's enough." The man met her eyes again, and this time there was something new in his expression. Gratitude, respect, thank you. Aubrey nodded stiffly and turned away, needing to put some distance between herself and the intensity of his gaze. She busied herself pulling out the first aid kit, her hands still shaking slightly. Behind her, she heard him moving toward the storage room, heard Nina's soft voice asking a question she couldn't make out, heard his low response, and Aubrey realized with cold certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. Whatever line she'd crossed tonight, there was no going back. 20 minutes later, Nina sat wrapped in 2 oversized towels on one of the vinyl booths, her small hands curled around a mug of warm soup. Aubrey had found a staff member's spare hoodie in the lockers, way too big for the little girl, but dry and soft. Nina's dark hair was beginning to curl as it dried, framing her delicate face. The man had changed too. He'd stripped off the soaked suit jacket and dress shirt, replacing them with a plain black t-shirt that had been in the same locker. It fit him perfectly, stretching across his broad shoulders and revealing more of the intricate tattoos that covered his arms, geometric patterns interwoven with symbols Aubrey didn't recognize. He sat across from his daughter, watching her eat with an intensity that bordered on obsessive. Every spoonful she took seemed to ease something in him, some terrible tension that had been wound too tight for too long. Aubrey leaned against the bar, arms crossed, trying to decide if she was making the biggest mistake of her life or just the most recent one. "She should eat more," Aubrey said, slowly. "If she's been running on empty, her stomach needs time to adjust." The man nodded without looking away from Nina. "She's been eating. Just not well. Not consistently." "How long have you been running?" 3 days. His jaw tightened. 3 days since I realized they weren't going to stop coming." Nina set down her spoon, her expression suddenly anxious. "Papa?" He reached across the table immediately, covering her small hand with his. "I'm right here, sweetheart. We're safe. Promise?" Something broke in his expression just for a second, just long enough for Aubrey to see the man beneath the armor. "I promise." Nina seemed to accept this, returning to her soup with the focused determination of a child who'd learned not to waste food. Aubrey pulled out a stool and sat down, suddenly too exhausted to stand. The adrenaline had fully worn off now, leaving her drained and shaky. "You said you made a mistake. What kind of mistake gets people hunting you through a storm?" The man was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, controlled, but Aubrey could hear the rage simmering beneath it. "My wife died 6 years ago," he said. "At least, that's what I was told." Aubrey frowned. "What do you mean, that's what you were told?" "She went into labor early. Complications," the doctor said. "She hemorrhaged during delivery. They tried everything, but—" He stopped, his hand tightening around Nina's. "She was gone before I could say goodbye. They handed me my daughter and told me my wife was dead." Nina's shoulders had gone rigid. She stared down at her soup, no longer eating. "I believed them," the man continued, his voice hardening. "For 6 years, I believed them. I raised Nina alone. I built my life around making sure she had everything: safety, stability, a future. And I never questioned what happened that night." "What changed?" Aubrey asked quietly. 3 months ago, I needed Nina's medical records for school enrollment. The hospital couldn't find them. Said there was a clerical error. Files had been misplaced." His eyes were distant now, remembering. I pushed hard. And suddenly people who'd been helpful went silent. Nurses who'd been there that night transferred to other cities. The doctor who delivered Nina, who told me my wife had died, retired early and moved to Costa Rica. Aubrey's stomach twisted. "You think they lied to you?" "I know they lied." His voice was flat, certain. "I started digging. I found discrepancies in the death certificate. Blood work that didn't match. Signatures from doctors who weren't even on shift that night." He looked at Aubrey directly. "My wife didn't die in childbirth. She disappeared." The words hung heavy in the air between them. "Why would they?" Aubrey started, but stopped. The answer was obvious. Someone made her disappear. Someone with enough power to erase records, to silence witnesses, to make sure I never asked questions. His hand moved unconsciously to Nina's back, a protective gesture, and when I got too close to the truth, they decided to eliminate the problem. "You. And Nina." The rage in his voice was barely contained now. "They tried to kill my daughter to keep me quiet." Aubrey felt sick. She looked at Nina, who was still sitting unnaturally still, her small face carefully blank. This child had learned to make herself invisible, Aubrey realized. Had learned that survival sometimes meant not reacting, not crying, not making a sound. "The men tonight," Aubrey said slowly. "Were they part of it?" The man's expression turned darker. "One of them was. The one with the scar, I recognized him. His name is Petrov. He worked security for one of my—" He caught himself. "For someone I do business with. Someone I trusted. Someone you trusted ordered your wife killed? I don't know yet." His fingers drummed against the table, the only outward sign of his agitation. "But I'm going to find out. And when I do—" He stopped abruptly, glancing at Nina. The little girl's eyes were closed now, her head drooping with exhaustion. "She's asleep," Aubrey said softly. The man looked at his daughter, and the transformation in his face was immediate. All the hardness, all the controlled violence, it melted away, leaving only tenderness and fear. "She hasn't slept through the night in 3 days," he said quietly. "Every sound wakes her. Every car that passes. She thinks they're coming for us. They are coming for you. I know." He stood carefully, lifting Nina into his arms. She didn't wake, just curled against his chest with the automatic trust of a child who knew her father would keep her safe. "Which is why I can't keep her with me much longer." Aubrey's pulse quickened. "What does that mean?" He carried Nina to one of the booths and laid her down gently, arranging the towels around her like blankets. Then he turned to face Aubrey, and his expression was serious, determined, and terrifying in its implications. "I need to finish this," he said. "I need to find out who ordered my wife killed and why. I need to make sure they can never hurt Nina again." "Okay," Aubrey said slowly. "So do it." "I can't. Not with her." He looked at his sleeping daughter. "As long as Nina is with me, she's a target, a weakness they can exploit." Understanding crashed over Aubrey like cold water. "No," she said immediately. "Absolutely not. You saved her life tonight. By lying to some guys for 5 minutes. That's completely different from—" "She trusts you. She doesn't even know me," Aubrey said, her voice rising despite herself. "I gave her soup and a towel. That's not trust, that's basic human decency." The man stepped closer, his presence filling the small space between them. Up close, Aubrey could see the exhaustion etched into his face, the dark circles under his eyes, the tension in his jaw, the way his shoulders carried weight that would have crushed most people. You think I would ask this if I had any other choice? His voice was low, intense. You think I want to leave my daughter with a stranger? Then don't. Aubrey gestured helplessly toward the sleeping child. Take her somewhere safe. A hotel. Another city. Hell, leave the country if you have to. They'll find us. They have resources I can't outrun forever. He ran a hand through his damp hair, frustration breaking through his controlled exterior. Every hour I keep Nina with me is another hour she's in danger. Every person who sees us together is another lead for them to follow. So what's your plan? Drop her off with me like I'm some kind of daycare and go on a revenge mission? Not revenge. His eyes hardened. Justice. Answers. And eliminating the threat so my daughter can have a life that doesn't involve running and hiding and being afraid of every shadow. Aubrey laughed a sharp, bitter sound. You're insane. You know that, right? You burst into my bar, bring armed men to my door, and now you want me to... She stopped, pressing her palms against her temples. I can't do this. I can't take care of a child. I can barely take care of myself. I've seen how you look at her. The words stopped Aubrey cold. You have instincts, he continued quietly. Training, maybe. Medical background. 1 year of nursing school, Aubrey said flatly. Which I dropped out of. So no, I don't have training. I have debt and a dead-end job, and about 48 hours before I get evicted from my apartment. She said it to push him away, to make him understand how catastrophically unqualified she was for this. But instead of backing down, something shifted in his expression. How much do you owe? Aubrey blinked. What? Your rent. How much? That's none of your... How much? The intensity in his voice made her answer before she could think better of it. $680, plus another $1,000 in bills I can't pay. But that's not the point. Consider it handled. Aubrey stared at him. You can't just... I can. He pulled out his phone, somehow still functional despite being soaked, and tapped the screen a few times. What's your landlord's name? Stop! Aubrey grabbed his wrist, surprised by how warm his skin was. You can't buy me. That's not how this works. I'm not buying you. He looked down at her hand on his wrist, then back up at her face. I'm compensating you for risk, for time, for the courage it took to lie to those men tonight when you had every reason to turn me away. Aubrey pulled her hand back as if burned. I don't want your money. Everyone wants money. Not like this. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly feeling exposed. Not as payment for whatever this is. He was quiet for a moment, studying her with those dark, assessing eyes. Then he glanced back at Nina, still sleeping peacefully in the booth, and something in his expression cracked. I'm asking you as a father, he said quietly. Not as... He stopped, seeming to choose his words carefully. Not as what I am. As a man who loves his daughter more than his own life, and knows he can't keep her safe alone. The vulnerability in those words hit Aubrey harder than any threat could have. She looked at Nina, really looked at her. The way her small hand was curled under her chin, the slight furrow between her eyebrows, even in sleep. The too thin frame that spoke of meals missed and stress carried in a body far too young. How long? Aubrey heard herself ask. 3 days. 4 at most. And then what? Then I come back for her. The threat will be neutralized, and we disappear. New city, new identities, new life. He paused. You'll never hear from us again. The finality of it should have been reassuring. Instead, it felt like loss. What if something happens to you? Aubrey asked quietly. What if you don't come back? I'll come back, but what if you don't? He held her gaze for a long moment. Then there's an envelope in my jacket pocket. Instructions. Money. Everything she'll need. The casual way he said it, like planning for his own death, was just another contingency made Aubrey's chest tighten. You're really going to do this, she said. With or without my help? Yes. And if I say no? Then I take Nina and we keep running until they catch us or we get lucky. His jaw tightened. But luck runs out eventually. Aubrey closed her eyes, trying to think through the panic. This was insane. Harboring the child of a what? A criminal? A mafia boss? She didn't even know his name. Didn't know who was hunting him or why his wife had really disappeared. But she knew what it felt like to be alone and desperate. She knew what it felt like when no one would help you. When every door closed in your face. When the world decided you didn't matter enough to save. I need to know your name, she said finally, opening her eyes. If I'm going to do this and I haven't decided yet, I need to at least know what to call you. He hesitated, and Aubrey saw the war playing out behind his eyes. Giving his name meant trust, meant vulnerability, meant handing a weapon to someone who could destroy him. "Cyril," he said finally. "My name is Cyril." Cyril. Aubrey tested the name, found it fit him somehow. Strong, old-fashioned, dangerous. "And your wife?" What was her name? Pain flashed across his face, raw and immediate. "Isabella." "Isabella," Aubrey repeated softly. Then she looked at Nina again, at the child who'd lost her mother before she could remember her, who'd spent 6 years with a father who loved her fiercely, but lived in shadows. Aubrey thought about her own father, about the months she'd spent watching him die, helpless to save him, about the guilt that still kept her awake at night. She couldn't save everyone, but maybe, just maybe, she could save this one little girl. 3 days, Aubrey said, her voice barely above a whisper. 4 maximum. And you give me a way to contact you if something goes wrong. Relief crashed across Cyril's face, so profound it made him look years younger. "Thank you," he breathed. "Don't thank me yet," Aubrey said. "I still think this is the stupidest thing I've ever done." "It is." A ghost of a smile touched his lips, but it might also save her life. Cyril left before sunrise. Aubrey woke to find him standing by the booth where Nina still slept, his hand resting gently on his daughter's head. He'd changed back into his suit, somehow still damp but presentable, and his expression was a careful mask of control. But Aubrey saw the way his fingers trembled slightly as they brushed through Nina's curls, saw the way he had to force himself to step back. "There's a phone in the envelope," he said quietly, not looking at Aubrey. "Untraceable. It only has 1 number programmed in. If anything happens, anything at all, you call it." Aubrey nodded, clutching the thick envelope he'd given her earlier. She hadn't opened it yet. Wasn't sure she wanted to know how much money was inside, or what the instructions said about what to do if he never came back. "She likes her eggs scrambled, not fried," Cyril continued, his voice tight. "She's allergic to strawberries. She has nightmares sometimes, usually around 3 a.m. Just hold her hand and tell her she's safe. She'll go back to sleep." "Cyril, she doesn't like loud noises, sudden movements, men in dark clothes." He was speaking faster now, as if trying to download 6 years of fatherhood into a single moment. "She's shy around strangers, but she warms up quickly if you're patient. She likes to help, give her small tasks. It makes her feel useful. And she," his voice cracked, "she asks about her mother sometimes. I never know what to say." Aubrey stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You need to wake her. Say goodbye properly." "I can't." The admission seemed to cost him. "If I wake her, if she sees me leaving?" He stopped, jaw clenching. "It's better this way." "Better for who?" He didn't answer. Instead, he leaned down one last time, pressing a kiss to Nina's forehead. Lingering there for a moment, his eyes closed, his hand cradling the back of her head. Memorizing, Aubrey realized, in case this was the last time. Then he straightened, and the mask was back in place. 4 days, he said. 4 days, Aubrey repeated. He walked to the door, then paused. "You're a good person, Aubrey Davis. Better than you know." And then he was gone, disappearing into the pre-dawn darkness like he'd never been there at all. Nina woke an hour later. For a moment, she seemed confused, those dark eyes scanning the unfamiliar space, searching. Then they landed on Aubrey, and Aubrey watched the child's expression shift from confusion to understanding to something that looked like resignation. "Papa left," Nina said quietly. "Not a question." "He'll be back," Aubrey said, trying to sound confident. "He just has some things he needs to take care of." Nina nodded slowly, accepting this with the kind of maturity that broke Aubrey's heart. "He always comes back. Always?" "Except when he can't." Nina sat up, the oversized hoodie drowning her small frame. "But he tries really hard." Aubrey didn't know what to say to that, so she offered the only thing she could. "Are you hungry?" The first day was awkward. Nina moved through Aubrey's tiny studio apartment like a ghost, occupying as little space as possible. She sat perfectly still on the worn couch, hands folded in her lap, watching Aubrey with careful, assessing eyes. "You can turn on the TV if you want," Aubrey offered. "Or I have some books. They're probably too old for you, but..." "I'm okay," Nina said politely. "Thank you." It was the kind of politeness that came from survival, not genuine comfort. The kind that said, "Don't notice me, don't be angry with me, don't send me away." Aubrey tried making scrambled eggs the way Cyril had described. Nina ate them slowly, methodically, finishing every bite even though Aubrey could tell she wasn't particularly hungry. "You don't have to finish it if you're full," Aubrey said gently. Nina's eyes widened slightly, surprised. Maybe. Or afraid of the trick. "Papa says not to waste food." "Your papa's right. But he also wants you to be comfortable. It's okay to stop when you're full." Nina considered this for a long moment, then set down her fork with such careful precision, it made Aubrey want to cry. The second day was better. Nina asked if she could help fold laundry, and Aubrey, remembering Cyril's advice about small tasks, said yes. They sat on the floor together, and Aubrey showed her how to match socks and fold towels. Nina's movements were precise, focused, like folding laundry was the most important job in the world. "You're really good at this," Aubrey said. A small smile flickered across Nina's face. "Papa and I do laundry together every Sunday. He says it's important to keep things clean and organized." "He sounds like a good papa." "He is." The smile faded. "He gets sad sometimes, though. When he thinks I'm not looking. He stares at the picture of Mama and his face gets heavy." Aubrey's chest tightened. "Do you remember your Mama?" Nina shook her head. "I was too little. Papa says she was beautiful and brave, and she loved me more than anything." She paused, folding a washcloth with intense concentration. "But I think that makes him sadder, that I don't remember." "I think," Aubrey said carefully, "that it probably makes him sad because he wishes you could have known her. Not because you don't remember." Nina looked up at her, those two old eyes searching Aubrey's face. "Do you have a papa?" "I did. He died a few months ago. Does that make you sad?" "Every day." Nina nodded, as if this made perfect sense. Then she reached out and patted Aubrey's hand with her small one, a gesture of comfort so pure and instinctive that Aubrey had to blink back sudden tears. "It's okay to be sad," Nina said quietly. "Papa says sad feelings need somewhere to go, or they get stuck inside and make you sick." Aubrey found herself laughing through the tightness in her throat. "Your papa sounds very wise. He reads a lot of books." The third day, something shifted. Nina woke from her nightmare at 3:17 a.m., exactly as Cyril had predicted. Aubrey heard the small, choked sound from the couch and went to her immediately, sitting down and taking Nina's hand. "You're safe," Aubrey whispered. "I'm right here." "You're safe." Nina's hand gripped hers tightly, surprisingly strong for such a small child. Her breathing was rapid, panicked. "It was just a dream," Aubrey continued softly. "Just a bad dream. Nothing can hurt you here." Slowly, Nina's breathing steadied. Her grip loosened slightly, but she didn't let go. "Will you stay?" Nina whispered. "As long as you need me to." Nina shifted closer, and Aubrey adjusted so the little girl could rest against her side. They sat like that in the darkness, Nina's small body gradually relaxing, her breathing evening out into sleep, but she never let go of Aubrey's hand. And when morning came, when Nina woke and saw Aubrey still there, still holding her hand, still keeping watch, something in the child's expression changed. Trust, Aubrey realized. For the first time since Cyril had left, Nina smiled. A real smile, small but genuine. "Can we make pancakes?" Nina asked. "We can make anything you want." While Aubrey and Nina made pancakes in a cramped Brooklyn apartment, Cyril stood in a warehouse 20 miles away, watching a man bleed. The warehouse was abandoned, had been for years. Rusted machinery cast long shadows in the dim light filtering through broken windows. The air smelled of oil and decay and something darker. Something that came from fear. The man zip-tied to the metal chair was named Dimitri. He'd worked for Cyril for 8 years, handled logistics, moved product, kept books. Cyril had trusted him with shipment schedules, warehouse locations, supplier contacts. He'd never trusted him with the truth about Isabella. "I don't know what you're talking about," Dimitri said for the 4th time, blood dripping from his split lip. "I swear I don't. You were there that night." Cyril's voice was calm, controlled, the kind of calm that was more terrifying than rage. "The hospital. 6 years ago. I saw you in the security footage." Dimitri's eyes widened just slightly, just enough. "The footage that was supposed to have been erased," Cyril continued, circling the chair slowly. "The footage that took me 3 months and considerable resources to recover. You were there, Dimitri. 3rd floor, maternity ward. 11:47 p.m., 23 minutes before my wife allegedly died. I was visiting." "Don't." Cyril stopped in front of him. "Don't insult my intelligence. You don't have family, no wife, no children, no siblings in the city. So tell me, What were you doing in that hospital the night my wife disappeared? Dimitri's jaw worked, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cold. You're wrong about this. Isabella died in childbirth. Everyone knows. Cyril's fist connected with Dimitri's jaw so fast the man didn't see it coming. The chair tipped backward, crashing to the concrete floor. Blood spattered across the oil-stained ground. Try again, Cyril said quietly. By noon, Dimitri was talking. Not because Cyril had broken him physically, though the man's face was a mess of bruises and split skin, but because Cyril had shown him the alternative, had made him understand that cooperation was the only thing standing between him and a shallow grave in the Jersey Pine Barrens. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, Dimitri gasped, his words slurred from his swollen mouth. It was just supposed to be insurance. Leverage. In case I ever what? Cyril's voice was deadly soft. In case you ever tried to leave. To go legitimate, to expose. Dimitri stopped, realizing he'd said too much. Expose what? Silence. Cyril crouched down, bringing his face level with Dimitri's. Tell me, or I start removing fingers. The operation, Dimitri whispered. The trafficking routes. The judges on payroll. The politicians. Isabella found out about the scope of it, how deep it went. She was going to take Nina and run. She was going to... He swallowed hard. She was going to testify. The words hit Cyril like physical blows. Isabella had known, had discovered what he really was, what he really did. And instead of confronting him, instead of giving him a chance to explain or change or protect her, she'd been going to run. Going to expose everything, going to destroy not just him, but everyone connected to the organization. Who gave the order? Cyril asked, his voice barely audible. I don't know the specifics. It came from the top, way above my pay grade. The top. Cyril stood, his mind racing. Konstantin? Dimitri's expression gave him the answer before his words did. I never heard names, just orders. They said Isabella had become a liability, that she needed to be neutralized before the baby was born, before she could, but she survived long enough to deliver Nina. They had to wait. Couldn't risk the baby. But after, Dimitri stopped, seeing something in Cyril's face that made him go pale. They told you she died. That was the arrangement. You got to keep Nina. And Isabella disappeared. Where? Dri. I don't know. I swear on my life I don't know. That part was handled by specialists. People who don't leave traces. Cyril absorbed this, his mind working through the implications. For 6 years, he'd believed Isabella was dead. For 6 years, he'd raised Nina alone, mourning a wife who'd died bringing their daughter into the world. But Isabella might still be alive. Might be in some cell, some safe house, some unmarked location, kept alive as leverage or insurance or simply because whoever ordered her disappearance liked having options. The rage that had been simmering in Cyril's chest ignited into something cold and focused. Petrov, Cyril said. He was at the hospital too. Dimitri nodded weakly. He handled the extraction. He and his team. And the others who were hunting me 2 nights ago? Hired guns. They knew you were getting close to the truth. They were supposed to eliminate you and the kid before you could expose the whole thing. The kid. As if Nina was just a loose end to be tied up, a problem to be solved. Cyril felt something dark settle over him. The part of himself he usually kept locked away. The part that had built an empire on fear and blood and ruthless efficiency. Here's what's going to happen, Cyril said, his voice flat and final. You're going to give me every name, every location, every piece of information you have about who ordered my wife taken and who's been protecting that secret for 6 years. And then? Dimitri asked, though he clearly already knew the answer. And then you're going to disappear, permanently, because men who betray me don't get second chances. By sunset, Cyril had 4 more names. One was already dead, retired to Costa Rica, and suffered a convenient heart attack 3 months ago. Convenient, because it had happened the same week Cyril started asking questions. The other 3 were still operational, still in the city, still breathing, not for long. Cyril stood outside the warehouse, watching the sun sink below the New York skyline. Somewhere in this city, his daughter was safe, was warm, was eating dinner with a woman who'd shown her more kindness in 3 days than most of the world had offered in 6 years. And somewhere in this city or beyond it, his wife might still be alive. The phone in his pocket buzzed. The untraceable one. His heart stopped for a moment before he pulled it out. A text. A photo. Nina, smiling at the camera, flower on her nose. Behind her, Aubrey grinned, holding up a slightly lopsided pancake like a trophy. Below the image, she wanted me to tell you she made pancakes, and that she misses you. But she's okay. We're okay. Cyril stared at the photo for a long moment, something in his chest cracking and reforming. 3 more days, 3 more names, 3 more men, between him and the truth. And then he could go home. The 4th night arrived with another storm. Aubrey stood at the window of her apartment, watching rain streak down the glass in familiar patterns. Nina was asleep on the couch, finally comfortable enough to sprawl out instead of curling into a tight, defensive ball. The little girl had spent the evening teaching Aubrey a card game. Her father had invented something involving matching colors and making up silly rules and had fallen asleep mid-laugh, her small hand still clutching the cards. 4 days. Cyril had said 3, maybe 4. It had been exactly 4. Aubrey checked the untraceable phone for the 100th time that hour. No messages, no calls. Nothing since yesterday's brief text. Almost done. Soon. Soon could mean anything. Hours. Days. Never. She tried not to think about that last possibility. Tried not to imagine having to open the envelope and read instructions for what to do with a 6-year-old whose father wasn't coming back. Tried not to think about how much Nina had already lost, and how devastating it would be to lose the one person who loved her unconditionally. Thunder rumbled, and Nina stirred but didn't wake. She'd been sleeping better the past 2 nights. Fewer nightmares, longer stretches of peace. This morning, she'd laughed so hard at one of Aubrey's terrible jokes that she'd snorted, then covered her mouth in embarrassment. It had been the most beautiful sound Aubrey had ever heard, a sound that didn't belong to her, that she'd have to give back if Cyril returned. The knock came at 2:17 a.m. 3 sharp raps, deliberate and controlled. Aubrey's heart lurched. She moved to the door carefully, checking the peephole first. A tall figure stood in the hallway, rain-soaked and still. She could just make out the shape of his jaw, the breadth of his shoulders. Cyril. She unlocked the door with shaking hands. He looked different. Harder, somehow. There were new bruises on his knuckles, a cut healing on his cheekbone. His suit was immaculate, clearly new, but his eyes carried something dark and final that hadn't been there before. Is she, he started, safe, asleep? Aubrey stepped back to let him in. She's been asking about you. Cyril entered slowly, his gaze immediately finding Nina on the couch. For a moment, he just stood there, staring at his daughter like he was afraid she might disappear if he looked away. Then he moved toward her with careful, quiet steps. He knelt beside the couch, his hand hovering over Nina's head, before finally touching her curls with a gentleness that made Aubrey's chest ache. Nina, he whispered. Sweetheart. Nina's eyes fluttered open. For a second, she seemed confused. Then recognition hit and she launched herself at him with a small cry. Papa. Cyril caught her, pulling her tight against his chest. His eyes closed, his jaw clenched, and Aubrey saw his shoulders shake with something that might have been a sob he was desperately trying to contain. I'm here, he murmured into Nina's hair. I'm here, baby. I'm so sorry. I'm here. Nina clung to him, her small fists gripping his jacket. But then, slowly, she pulled back, looked at him with those 2 old eyes, and turned to find Aubrey standing by the door. Aubrey, Nina said, reaching out one hand toward her. Aubrey's throat closed. She didn't move, couldn't move. It's okay, Cyril said gently to his daughter. We need to thank Aubrey for taking such good care of you. I don't want to go, Nina said, her voice small but clear. The words hung in the air like broken glass. Cyril's expression cracked. Nina, I want to stay with Aubrey. Nina's hand was still outstretched, trembling slightly. Can't we stay with Aubrey? Aubrey finally moved, crossing the small space to kneel beside them. She took Nina's small hand in hers, squeezing gently. Your papa loves you so much, Aubrey said, her voice thick. He did everything, risked everything to make sure you'd be safe. And now you get to be with him. That's a good thing. But I like it here. Tears were forming in Nina's eyes now. I like making pancakes, and folding laundry, and how you tell stories at bedtime. I like... Her voice broke. I don't want to leave. Cyril looked at Aubrey over his daughter's head, and what she saw in his expression made her breath catch. Not relief that his ordeal was over. Not triumph at having completed his mission. Devastation. He was seeing what she'd seen all along, that in 4 days, his daughter had found something she'd never had before. Not just safety. Not just care. Home. Can we talk? Cyril asked quietly. Just for a moment? Aubrey nodded. Nina didn't want to let go. but Cyril promised he was just going to stand right over there, that she could see him the whole time. They moved to the small kitchen area, barely 6 feet from where Nina sat on the couch, watching them with anxious eyes. "It's done," Cyril said, his voice low. "Petrov is dead. The others who came after us dealt with. The man who gave the order." He stopped, his jaw tightening. "He won't be giving any more orders. And your wife?" Something flickered across his face. Grief, rage, resignation. "She died 3 years ago. Actually died. They kept her alive for almost 3 years, trying to extract information, trying to use her as leverage, but she never broke, never told them anything that could hurt Nina." His hands clenched into fists. "She died protecting our daughter, and I spent those years believing she'd already been gone. Cyril, I killed them all." The words were flat, final. Everyone involved, everyone who knew. "The threat is gone. Nina is safe now. We can disappear. Start over somewhere clean, somewhere far from this city, and everything in it." "That's good," Aubrey said, even as her heart cracked. "That's what you wanted, is it?" He looked at Nina, still watching them anxiously from the couch. 4 days ago, she was afraid of her own shadow. She barely spoke. She didn't sleep. And now, he gestured helplessly. Now she laughs. She plays. She asks for bedtime stories. "You did that. She just needed to feel safe." "No." Cyril's gaze returned to Aubrey. "She needed a mother." The word landed between them like a grenade. "I can't be that," Aubrey whispered. I can't. "I'm not asking you to be," Cyril said quickly. "I'm just saying." He stopped, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "I don't know what I'm saying. 4 days ago, I had a plan. Eliminate the threat, take my daughter, disappear, clean, simple. And now it's complicated. Now I look at my daughter reaching for someone else and I realize I've been so focused on keeping her alive that I forgot she needs to live." Aubrey felt tears burning behind her eyes. "You're a good father, Cyril. The best I've ever seen. She adores you, but she needs more than I can give her. More than survival and protection and a father who lives in shadows." He looked at Aubrey directly. "She needs you. For 4 days," Aubrey said firmly. "I had her for 4 days. That's not it, doesn't mean. It means everything." Cyril's voice was quiet but intense. "It means in 4 days you gave her something I haven't been able to give her in 6 years. Peace." Nina called out from the couch, her voice anxious. "Papa? Aubrey?" They both turned to her immediately. "We're right here," Cyril said. "We're just talking. Are you leaving again?" The fear in Nina's voice was palpable. Cyril looked at Aubrey. Aubrey looked at Nina. And in that moment, something shifted, something fundamental and irreversible. "No, sweetheart," Cyril said slowly, his eyes still on Aubrey. "I'm not leaving. Not yet." Morning came too quickly. Nina had eventually fallen back asleep between them on the couch, one small hand holding Aubrey's, the other clutching her father's shirt. Aubrey hadn't slept. Neither had Cyril. They'd sat in silence, watching the child who connected them, both afraid to speak and shatter whatever fragile thing was forming in the darkness. When pale light finally filtered through the window, Nina stirred and went immediately to the bathroom. The moment she was out of earshot, Cyril spoke. "There are things you need to know," he said, "before you make any decision, before this goes any further." Aubrey's stomach tightened. "What kind of things?" "The truth about what I am, what I do." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. "You deserve to know who you've been protecting. You're in organized crime. I figured that out. It's more than that." His voice was steady, controlled the voice of someone confessing sins they'd long since made peace with. "My family has controlled shipping and distribution in the Northeast for 3 generations. Drugs, weapons, information. We move things people don't want moved. We protect things people don't want protected. We have politicians, judges, police captains on payroll." Aubrey's hands went cold. "How many people have you killed?" "Personally? 17. If you count the ones I ordered." He stopped. "More." The number should have horrified her, should have sent her running. But something in his tone, the flat honesty of it, the lack of pride or shame kept her rooted in place. "The men hunting you," she said. "They were part of your organization. Some were. Others were hired by people who wanted to protect the secret of what happened to Isabella." He looked at her directly. "My wife discovered the scope of what we did. She was going to expose everything. Take Nina and disappear testify against everyone connected to the operation. So they took her instead. They took her to a facility upstate, interrogated her for information, names, locations, evidence she might have hidden. She gave them nothing. For 3 years, she gave them nothing. His voice cracked slightly. She died in a cell, alone, protecting the daughter she'd never see again. Aubrey felt tears burning her eyes. How did you find out? After I dealt with Petrov, I made the others talk. They told me where she'd been kept. I went there. He paused, his jaw working. The facility was abandoned 6 months ago, but there were records. Medical logs. They documented everything they did to her, everything they tried, and at the end, he stopped, swallowing hard. At the end, she left a message, scratched into the wall with her fingernails. Just 3 words, protect our Nina. The image of it, Isabella, dying, thinking only of her daughter, made Aubrey's chest ache. The man who gave the order, Cyril continued, Konstantin Volkov. He was my mentor, the man who taught me everything, who I trusted like a father. His hands clenched into fists. He's dead now. They're all dead. Everyone who knew what happened to Isabella, everyone who touched that decision, I made sure of it. Revenge, Aubrey said quietly. Justice. His eyes were hard. And insurance. As long as anyone knew the truth, Nina was in danger. They could use her against me, use her to maintain control, now that knowledge is buried with them. Aubrey processed this, her mind racing. So Nina is safe. From that particular threat, yes. But my world, he gestured vaguely. There will always be threats, always enemies, always someone looking for leverage or weakness. That's the cost of the life I've built, the life you're going to leave behind. That was the plan. New identities, new city, start clean. He looked at Nina's closed bathroom door. But clean doesn't mean safe. Clean doesn't mean normal. It just means running from a different angle. What are you saying? I'm saying I don't know anymore. The admission seemed to cost him. 4 days ago, I had clarity, purpose, a clear path forward. And then I came back here and saw my daughter reaching for you. And I realized, he stopped. I realized that keeping her alive isn't the same as giving her a life. The bathroom door opened. Nina emerged, rubbing her eyes sleepily. She looked between them, her expression uncertain. Are you fighting? She asked quietly. No, sweetheart, Cyril said immediately. Just talking. About me? The perceptiveness in the question made both adults freeze. Yes, Aubrey said, because lying seemed worse. About what happens next? Nina walked over slowly, climbing back onto the couch between them. She looked at her father first, then at Aubrey, then down at her hands. I want to stay here, she said, her voice small but determined. With Aubrey, and with you, Papa, all of us together. Cyril's expression cracked. Nina, I know we were supposed to leave, to go somewhere new and be different people. You told me before. Nina's hands twisted in her lap. But I don't want to be different people. I want to be us. Here. It's not that simple, baby. Why not? Nina looked up at him with those devastating eyes. You said the bad men are gone. You said I'm safe now. So why can't we stay? Aubrey watched Cyril struggle with the answer, saw him trying to find words that would make sense to a 6-year-old. Trying to explain that safety wasn't just about immediate threats, but about patterns and risks, and the fundamental incompatibility of his world with anything resembling normal. But before he could speak, Nina turned to Aubrey. Don't you want us to stay? She asked. The question was so direct, so vulnerable, that Aubrey felt her carefully constructed walls crumble. It's not about what I want, Aubrey said carefully. But do you? Nina pressed. Want us to stay? Aubrey looked at this little girl who'd stumbled into her life 4 days ago. This child who'd taught her card games and helped fold laundry and held her hand through nightmares. This 6-year-old who'd somehow cracked open Aubrey's guarded heart and made her remember what it felt like to care about someone other than herself. Yes, Aubrey whispered. I do. Nina's face lit up with such pure joy that it physically hurt to see. She turned to her father. See? Aubrey wants us to stay, so we can stay, right? Cyril looked at Aubrey over his daughter's head. In his expression, she saw everything he wasn't saying. The fear, the hope, the desperate desire to believe this impossible thing could work. It's not that easy, he said finally. There are things, complications. I know what you are, Aubrey interrupted. What you do. You just told me, and you're still here. I'm still here. Why? The word was barely audible, After everything I just told you, the killing, the organization, the life I've led, why aren't you running? Aubrey thought about her father, about the medical debt and the failed nursing career and the 47 rejected applications, about standing in this bar 4 nights ago, wondering if she'd ever matter to anyone again. Because 4 days ago, you trusted me with the thing you love most in the world, she said. And I've spent my whole life being invisible, being forgettable, being the person people overlook. But you saw me. You saw something in me worth trusting. And Nina, her voice caught. Nina made me remember what it feels like to be needed. You saved her life, Cyril said quietly. You both saved mine. The words hung between them, honest and raw and terrifying in their implications. Nina looked between them, her expression brightening with understanding beyond her years. So we can stay? Cyril reached out slowly and took Aubrey's hand. His skin was warm, his grip gentle but firm. If Aubrey agrees, he said, his eyes never leaving hers. If she understands what she's agreeing to, what it means to be connected to me, to us. Aubrey looked at their joined hands, at Nina's hopeful face, at Cyril's desperate, vulnerable expression. She thought about the eviction notice that was no longer on her door, about the bills that had been mysteriously paid, about the envelope still sitting unopened on her counter. I need to know one more thing, she said. Anything. Are you really leaving that life behind? The organization, the violence, all of it? Cyril was quiet for a long moment. I'm going to try. I have people who can take over operations, who can keep things running without me. It won't be immediate. I can't just walk away without causing a war. But yes, for Nina, he stopped, for the chance at something different. I'm going to try. It wasn't a guarantee. It wasn't even a promise. But it was honest. And somehow, that was enough. Okay, Aubrey said, her heart hammering. Okay. Nina made a sound of pure happiness and threw her arms around both of them. Cyril's hand tightened on Aubrey's. And in that moment, in a cramped Brooklyn apartment as dawn broke over the city, 3 broken people became something resembling whole. The sun was fully up now, streaming through the windows and painting everything in shades of gold. Nina had finally released them and was busy rearranging the couch cushions into what she called a celebration fort. Aubrey stood at the kitchen counter, staring at the envelope Cyril had given her 5 days ago. She still hadn't opened it. You can look, Cyril said from behind her. If you want to know what the contingency plan was. Aubrey picked up the envelope, feeling its weight. How much is in here? Enough. Enough for Nina's care, her education, everything she'd need if I didn't come back. Instructions on how to contact my lawyer, how to access accounts, how to give her the kind of life. He stopped. The kind of life I always wanted for her but wasn't sure I could provide. You were going to leave her everything. She's my everything. He moved to stand beside her, his shoulder nearly touching hers. But money isn't the same as presence. Resources aren't the same as love. I knew that even as I was writing the instructions. Knew that if I didn't come back, she'd have financial security, but she'd still be, he paused, alone. She wouldn't have been alone. I would have. Aubrey stopped, realizing what she'd been about to say. Cyril smiled slightly. You would have what? Taken care of her. Aubrey finished quietly. Even without knowing you. Even without any of this. I would have made sure she was okay. I know. That's why I trusted you. Aubrey set the envelope down, turning to face him fully. This is insane. You know that, right? We barely know each other. 4 days. That's all we've had. 4 days where you kept my daughter safe. Where you made her laugh and helped her sleep and gave her something I couldn't. He held her gaze. Some people spend years together and never really see each other. We saw each other in one night. That night you burst through my door looking like you'd been through hell. That night you could have turned me away and didn't. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull back. When she didn't, his hand cupped her cheek gently. That night you made a choice that changed everything. I made a lot of stupid choices that night. No. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. You made brave ones. From the living room, Nina called out, The fort is ready. Come see. Cyril's hand dropped, but his eyes stayed on Aubrey's face. We don't have to decide everything right now. We can take this slow. Figure it out as we go. Slow, Aubrey repeated. While living together in my tiny apartment with your 6-year-old daughter, I can get us a place. Something bigger. Safer. In a good school district. He paused. Or we can stay here, if you'd prefer. If this feels like home, home. The word settled into Aubrey's chest, warm and terrifying. I've never had anyone depend on me before, she admitted. Never had anyone look at me the way Nina looks at me. Like you're essential, Cyril finished. Like you matter. Because you do. Papa, Aubrey, come on! Nina's voice was getting impatient. They moved to the living room, where Nina had indeed constructed an elaborate fort, using every cushion, pillow, and blanket in the apartment. She stood beside it proudly, hands on her hips. It's for all of us, she announced. Because we're a family now. The casual way she said it, the absolute certainty in her voice made Aubrey's throat tight. Nina, Cyril started gently. We need to talk about, I know it's different. Nina interrupted, her expression suddenly serious. I know Aubrey isn't my real mama, and I know we just met, but families don't have to be normal to be real, right? Aubrey knelt down to Nina's level. Where did you learn that? Papa told me, when I asked why we didn't have a mama like other kids. Nina's small hand found Aubrey's. He said families come in all different shapes, and what makes them real is that they choose each other. Aubrey looked up at Cyril, who was watching his daughter with an expression of such profound love it made her ache. She's right, he said quietly. We choose each other. That's what makes it real. And you're choosing this? Aubrey asked. This life? This. She gestured helplessly at the tiny apartment, the chaos, the impossible situation they'd found themselves in. I'm choosing you, Cyril said simply. Both of you. For however long you'll have me. Nina tugged on Aubrey's hand. Will you have us? Such a simple question. Such an impossible answer. Aubrey thought about her life 4 days ago. The eviction notice. The debt. The crushing loneliness of being 26 and feeling like her life was already over. She thought about her father's last voicemail, the one she still couldn't delete, where he told her he was proud of her, even though she'd dropped out, even though she'd failed. You're stronger than you know, he'd said. And someday you'll find people who see that strength, who need it. She'd thought he was wrong, thought strength was something other people had, people with degrees and careers and lives that made sense. But maybe strength wasn't about having everything together. Maybe it was about making room in your broken life for other broken people. About choosing to build something new from the pieces that were left. Yes, Aubrey whispered. Then louder, more certain. Yes, I'll have you. Nina's squeal of delight was immediate and piercing. She launched herself at Aubrey, wrapping her small arms around her neck with such force they both nearly toppled over. Cyril steadied them, his hands on Aubrey's shoulders, and then somehow they were all hugging, all tangled together in the middle of this ridiculous cushion fort. And Aubrey realized she was crying, not from sadness or fear or the overwhelming impossibility of what they were attempting, but from something she barely recognized anymore. Hope. We'll figure it out, Cyril murmured into her hair. The logistics, the safety, the future. We'll figure all of it out together. Together, Aubrey repeated, testing the word, finding it fit. Nina pulled back, her face glowing. Can we have pancakes? To celebrate? Aubrey laughed through her tears. We can have anything you want. As Nina raced to the kitchen, already chattering about toppings and shapes, Cyril caught Aubrey's hand. Thank you, he said quietly, for seeing us, for staying, for... He stopped, emotion thick in his voice. For giving Nina something I never thought she'd have. What's that? A chance to be a normal kid, with a mother who loves her. He paused. You do, don't you? Love her? Aubrey thought about the past 4 days, the nightmares and pancakes and card games, the way Nina's face lit up when she smiled, the trust in her small hand. Yes, she said simply. I do. Cyril's expression cracked, relief and gratitude, and something deeper flooding his features. He pulled Aubrey close, pressing his forehead to hers. I don't deserve this, he whispered. Don't deserve you. None of us deserve each other, Aubrey said. But we're choosing each other anyway. From the kitchen, Nina called out, I found the chocolate chips. They pulled apart, both smiling now. Cyril's hand found Aubrey's, their fingers intertwining naturally. And as they walked toward the kitchen, toward Nina and pancakes and the impossible future they'd somehow agreed to build, Aubrey understood something fundamental. Sometimes salvation doesn't come from having everything figured out. Sometimes it comes from opening your door during a storm and letting strangers become family. Sometimes it comes from saying yes when every logical part of your brain screams no. Sometimes it comes from trusting that broken people can build something beautiful together. The bar door had closed behind them that first night. But now, in this small apartment filled with morning light and laughter, and the scent of pancakes. Something new was opening, something that looked a lot like home.